This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. We got some breaking news in the Donald Trump versus Michael Cohen federal case down in Florida. This just in, Michael Cohen has filed a very aggressive motion to dismiss the case in front of Judge Darren Gales, an Obama appointee in Miami who has the case. Now recall that Michael Cohen is the lead witness in the Manhattan DA's office and their criminal prosecution of Donald Trump for the Stormy Daniels affair. And just after all of the grand jury testimony was released by the Manhattan DA's office, as they have to do in the Stormy Daniels prosecution, just on the heels of that and an obvious retaliation for that, and for Michael Cohen being a witness against Donald Trump, they filed their case. Donald Trump filed an alleged $100 million or some ridiculously made up number lawsuit down in Florida. The other reason that Donald Trump filed that lawsuit, and we reported it both on my hot takes and on the podcast Legal AF, is to get out from under a future gag order or motion for protective order by the judge in Manhattan, Judge Merchan. And they were right, because just today, or just yesterday, Judge Merchan entered that protective order and gag order against Donald Trump to comment on any evidence, any witness testimony, any documents that the Manhattan DA's office gave to Donald Trump that they didn't already have, and to stop bashing, commenting, and criticizing potential witnesses in the case, which would include Michael Cohen. So anticipating that, Donald Trump filed that lawsuit several weeks ago in Miami under the guise of a lawsuit. It's really just a press release masquerading as a lawsuit, as the new motion to dismiss points out to Judge Gales. Now, we had speculated that because Michael Cohen lives in New York, I mean, he's our fellow podcaster, we know that, and not in Florida. The only person who lives in Florida, of course, is the former president of the United States. We'll get to that in a minute. The battle between whether he is the former or current president writ large in the papers filed by Michael Cohen in a very humorous but pointed way. But Michael Cohen lives in New York. So why are we in Florida? One of the things that people learn on Legal AF is that a court fundamentally has to have what's called personal jurisdiction, which is what it sounds like, jurisdiction over the person. They have to have subject matter jurisdiction in order to handle the case, the subject matter of the case, but they have to have fundamentally jurisdiction over the person under due process and civil due process constitutional principles. And if you're not a resident of the state, or you haven't done things aimed at injuring a resident of Florida, or committed the acts or the breach of contract and other claims in Florida, then Florida has no nexus. But that's not what Michael Cohen did ever so smartly. They like the draw of the judge. They like who the random wheel of the clerk's office assigned to this case, which is an Obama appointee, Darren Gales, a judge that I know well from my practice in Florida. He started out on the circuit court, the state court, trial court level, got elevated and got confirmed by the Senate. He's African American. He's the first openly gay person, black person on the federal bench. And they like this judge, and they don't want to take the risk of winning a motion to dismiss for lack of personal jurisdiction, which is not dispositive, meaning it would not end the case. Instead, it would just get transferred to New York. And while most of the judges in New York are democratically appointed, there are a couple of Trump-appointed judges, like Mary Kay Vocasil, who we've talked about in the past, who rejected Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA's attempt to stop Jim Jordan from having a former prosecutor come in for an interview. So rather than play the wild card and wonder what would happen, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. They've got a judge that they like in Darren Gales. And so they filed a motion to dismiss, arguing to the judge that the entire pleading, the complaint, should be dismissed because either it fails under the statute of limitations, meaning Donald Trump had between 1 and 2 years to bring these claims against Michael Cohen. And a lot of these claims, based on the facts alleged in the complaint that was filed, are very stale. They're 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years old. And, the court doesn't recognize lawsuits that are based on claims that are time barred. And that's what they're arguing here, that the breach of contract, which is the alleged purported confidentiality agreement that Trump says he had with Michael Cohen, is both invalid under public policy because they're not binding, and because it's time barred. They're, under New York or Florida law, you can't bring the breach of contract claim. You can't bring the other claims that are listed in there as well, which include breach of fiduciary duty, which is really arguing that Michael Cohen somehow breached his fiduciary duty as a lawyer because he didn't sufficiently cover up for the fraudulent scheme of Donald Trump. Listen to that one. In order for Donald Trump to prevail on breach of fiduciary duty, he'd have to concede that all the bad things that Michael Cohen did on his behalf and at his request were true, and that this breached his fiduciary duty because he wrote about it in his books or his memoirs, or he talks about it on his podcast, including those on the MeidasTouch network. But it's a weird place to be for Donald Trump, because he's going to have to admit all that is true and that it was a breach. If it's a lie, how can you breach your fiduciary duty if it's a lie? So it really masquerades as a defamation. It's really a defamation claim. And that's barred under the statute of limitations in New York and or Florida. They also argued fundamentally the lawsuit that was filed, which was to get out from under the future protective order and gag order by Judge Merchan, is violative of a Florida statute. We're going to put the Florida statute up on the board and talk about it here. It's the strategic lawsuits against public participation. We call that in the business SLAPP, SLAAP. And for those that are playing at home, it's at Florida Statute 768.295, little 3. Every state has one of these. And what it says fundamentally is that if you file a lawsuit to punish someone for freely exercising their constitutional right to talk, their First Amendment right to talk, that lawsuit is void as against public policy and should be dismissed by application of the SLAPP statute. This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. Cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. We're not talking about some weird mind voodoo from your wacky neighbor or some sketchy message board. We're talking about our sponsor, Fume. And they look at the problem in a different way. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong. So instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is an innovative, award-nominated device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural, delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. It's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which helps with de-stressing and managing anxiety while breaking your habit. The first time I used Fume, I was shocked at how flavorful and fresh it tasted. It's easy to hold and perfectly balanced. Quite honestly, extremely fun to fidget with. The real wood material and sleek design definitely classes it up, and I feel pretty darn cool holding it. Stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume has served over 100,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com and use code LEGALAF to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com. Use code LEGALAF to save 10% off the Journey Pack today. So Donald Trump should be slapped by Florida law, according to Michael Cohen and the lawyers that he has hired. One of my favorite parts of this 40-page motion to dismiss is Michael Cohen taking on Donald Trump right at the very beginning. In footnote 1, we're going to put it up on the screen as I'm talking. And in footnote 1, it said that Donald Trump likes to continue to call himself the President of the United States because he refuses to acknowledge the fact that he lost and that the election was certified by Joe Biden, and that at best, he is the former president of the United States. Donald Trump plays fast and loose even with his own titles. When he checked in to his arraignment in New York for his criminal arraignment, and they asked him on booking, What was his occupation? He didn't say former president or president because he's very delusional. He said businessman. So there he's a businessman. I've seen filings, and he's made many of them, in which he's identified himself as the president. I've seen him identify himself as the former president or the 45th president. He sort of picks and chooses, the titles that he wants to use. So that was a great footnote there to kind of Michael Cohen sticking it to Donald Trump right up front about his title. And then they had a very long set of introductory preliminary statement or facts before the judge even gets to the motion to dismiss, even gets to the heart of the motion about the retaliatory payback nature, retribution nature of Donald Trump. They led with a line that said Donald Trump's favorite verse from the Bible is an eye for an eye, right? It's a Bible fail reading of that particular provision of the Bible, but Donald Trump likes to retaliate and get retribution against somebody who does, in his view, does him wrong. In fact, just to show you how incestuous all of this is, not only is the MeidasTouch network mentioned in the complaint filed by Donald Trump because Michael Cohen is a podcaster with us and makes comments about the case when he can, but one of the laws, one of the court rulings that is mentioned when the motion Michael filed attacks the non-disclosure agreements or alleged confidentiality agreements that nobody's ever seen, that Donald Trump claims Michael Cohen violated, they cite to a case and precedent established by Jessica Denson, one of our co-anchors on Lights On with Jessica Denson and Ben Meiselas. So on the MeidasTouch network and on Legal AF, we don't just report on the law news, we make it. And so that case is cited in there as precedent for why NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and confidentiality agreements shouldn't be enforced, especially in these kind of circumstances. And when they're telling the story, when Michael Cohen's lawyers, who are really great here, in fact, one of them's been on our podcast, on the Legal AF podcast, friend of the show, Dania Perry. Dania Perry was the former head of the criminal division of the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office. And she's the lead lawyer here for Michael Cohen in making the filing. And just to show you how we're going to square this circle, one of the other aspects of retaliation that Michael Cohen wants Judge Gales, the judge in Florida, to know about, and he put it in his moving papers, is that when Donald Trump didn't like the social media that Michael Cohen was doing while he was on home confinement, and he didn't like any of that, and he wanted Michael Cohen to be gagged and stop talking about things on social media and stop writing books, he had the Bureau of Prisons, all under the Department of Justice, all through Bill Barr, take him out of home confinement and send him back to prison to finish his term. Michael had been released, I think, because of COVID and COVID policies, and he had served a lot of his term already, and he was on home confinement. So in complete retaliation, this was so bad that Michael Cohen filed a writ of habeas corpus, which is a special writ that you file if you're a prisoner and you're in incarceration, and you want the judge to get you out because you've been falsely incarcerated, in this case sent back to the Bureau of Prisons, sent back to a federal penitentiary. And Judge Hellerstein in the Southern District of New York ruled on the habeas corpus petition for Michael Cohen that he was retaliated against and sent him back out of prison, back to home confinement to finish his term. Why is Judge Hellerstein important? Because Judge Hellerstein is the judge that's now been assigned to Donald Trump's attempt to move his criminal prosecution. It's in state court in front of Judge Merchan for the 34 counts related to Stormy Daniels' hush money, to federal court. The judge that's going to decide that issue is Senior Judge Hellerstein. So you see how all of these things, all these data points that I'm connecting here on this hot take fit together. Michael Cohen, podcasting. Jessica Denson, podcasting. Judge Hellerstein, Judge Merchan, and the judge that matters for this particular hot take, who is Judge Darren Gales, a federal judge in the Southern District of Florida, who is now going to have to consider a motion to dismiss the entire pleading on all of the grounds that I've identified, brought by Michael Cohen against Donald Trump to get rid of that case. And I'm going to follow it. Next step in the process, Donald Trump gets a opposition paper. He gets to file an opposing brief, and that'll come within the next 15 to 20 days. Then there's a final brief by Michael Cohen. And then the case, that matter is what we call fully briefed and sitting for the judge. He may hold oral argument in person, or not. Donald Trump does not have to appear for that, just to answer the questions I know will come up. Or he could rule on the papers. Federal judges often rule on the papers. And then we'll have a ruling. We probably won't have that ruling for another month. It probably won't be until later June. We'll report on it on a podcast that I co-founded and co-anchored called Legal AF on the MeidasTouch network on Wednesdays and Saturdays. I do these hot takes about every day on some pressing matter that's arisen at the intersection of law and politics, just like this one. If you like what I'm doing, give me a thumbs up. You can comment. I take a look at the comments. I may even comment back to you, so we'll have a little bit of a dialogue. And then you can follow me on all things social media at MS Popok. This is Michael Popok on vacation, but reporting for you on the MeidasTouch network for Legal AF.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.